The space station Nexus 7 floated in the dark between stars like a giant metal flower. Its curved arms stretched out in all directions, catching the light from distant suns. Ships of many different shapes and sizes docked at its ports. Some looked like Earth vessels with clean lines and blue markings. Others were strange and alien, built by races that humans had never seen before. Kate Sullivan stood at the observation deck window, watching another ship approach. This one was massive and black, covered in sharp edges and glowing red lights. It looked more like a weapon than a transport. The ship belonged to the Zelkarians, and today would be the first time humans and Zelkarians would meet face to face. For serious talks, Kate touched the weapon at her side without thinking about it. She was a lieutenant commander in Earth's Space Navy, but today she was part of the diplomatic security team. Her job was to keep Ambassador Richard Hayes safe during these important meetings. She had been a Marine before joining the diplomatic corps, and she had fought in the Outer Colony Wars. Those battles had taught her that the galaxy was not a friendly place. "Nervous?" asked Ambassador Hayes as he joined her at the window. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, but Kate knew he had steel in his backbone. "You did not become Earth's top diplomat without being tough. Just careful," Kate replied. "We don't know much about these Zelkarians except that they like to fight, and they think they're better than everyone else." Hayes nodded. "The reports say they're 8 feet tall and strong as tanks. Their whole society is based on who can beat up who. But we're here to make peace, not war." Kate watched the Zelkarian ship dock with a loud clang that shook the station. Sometimes peace requires showing strength first. The main conference room was large and cold, with a long table in the center. The human delegation sat on one side, 12 people including Hayes, Kate, and various advisors and translators. They all wore simple blue uniforms with the Earth insignia on their shoulders. The room had been built for meetings between different alien races, so everything was sized bigger than humans needed. The doors opened with a hiss and the Zelkarians entered. Kate had read the reports, but seeing them in person was different. They were giants, each one over 8 feet tall and covered in what looked like crystal armor that grew from their skin. The armor was different colors, some blue, some red, some purple, and it caught the light like gems. Their faces were hard and angular with glowing eyes that seemed to look right through the humans. The lead Zelkarian was the biggest of all. His armor was deep red with gold markings that showed his high rank. This was General Vorthak, the supreme military commander of the Zelkarian Empire. He walked like he owned the universe, and his eyes showed nothing but contempt when he looked at the humans. "So these are the famous humans," Vorthak said in perfect English, though his voice sounded like grinding stone. "Smaller than I expected." Ambassador Hayes stood and bowed slightly. "General Vorthak, I am Ambassador Hayes, representing Earth and all human colonies. We're honored to meet with you today." Vorthak did not bow back. Instead, he laughed, a harsh sound that made Kate's teeth hurt. "Honored? You should be grateful we agreed to speak with you at all. Your species is barely out of its home system, yet you dare to claim territory that belongs to the strong." The other Zelkarians took their seats around the table, but Vorthak remained standing. Kate noticed they all deferred to him, looking down when he looked at them. This was clearly a society where might made right, and Vorthak was the mightiest of all. "We're here to discuss our mutual interests," Hayes said calmly. "The galaxy is large enough for both our peoples to prosper." "Prosper?" Vorthak slammed his fist on the table, making the whole thing shake. "You humans have taken 3 star systems that rightfully belong to the Zelkarian Empire. You have built colonies on worlds we marked for conquest. And now you speak of prosperity?" Kate felt her muscles tense. She had fought alien pirates and rebel colonists, but this was different. This was a formal diplomatic meeting, and she had to follow protocol. But every instinct told her that Vorthak was not here to make peace. Ambassador Hayes remained calm. "Those systems were unclaimed when our colonists arrived. We followed all galactic laws regarding new settlements. If the Zelkarian Empire has a legitimate claim, we can discuss compensation." "Compensation?" Vorthak's eyes blazed brighter. You offer us money for what is already ours? Your arrogance knows no bounds. One of the other Zelkarians, an older one, with blue armor, leaned forward. Perhaps we can reach an understanding. The humans are new to this region of space. They may not understand our ways. Vorthak turned on his subordinate with such fury that the other alien actually shrank back. Do not make excuses for them, Commander Zeth. Weakness is not forgiven by ignorance. Kate watched the exchange and learned something important about Zelkarian culture. They respected only strength, and showing any hint of weakness was dangerous. She made a mental note to tell Hayes later. Let me be clear, Vorthak continued, turning back to the humans. The Zelkarian Empire demands tribute from your colonies. You will provide us with 100,000 tons of rare metals each year, plus mining rights to any planets you discover. In exchange, we will allow you to continue existing in our space. The human delegation exchanged glances. Kate saw anger in their eyes, but they kept their faces neutral. This was not negotiation. This was extortion. Ambassador Hayes folded his hands on the table. I'm afraid those terms are unacceptable. Our colonies are sovereign human territory. We're willing to discuss trade agreements and mutual defense treaties, but we cannot and will not pay tribute to anyone. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The Zelkarians all turned to look at Vorthak, waiting to see how their leader would respond to being told no. Kate noticed that some of them seemed surprised that the small humans had dared to refuse. Vorthak stood very still for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. Did you just refuse a direct command from the Supreme General of the Zelkarian Empire? I declined your proposal, Hayes said politely but firmly. We're here to negotiate as equals, not to surrender to demands. Equals. Vorthak threw back his head and laughed again, and this time his subordinates joined in. The sound filled the room like the roar of some great beast. You think you are our equals? You are insects who learned to fly between the stars. You are nothing. Kate felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. She had heard this kind of talk before, from pirates and bullies who thought they could push humans around because they were bigger or had more ships. It never ended well for the bullies. Ambassador Hayes started to stand, probably to offer some diplomatic response that might calm the situation. But as he rose from his chair, Vorthak suddenly moved forward. The alien general was fast despite his size, crossing the distance between them in 2 quick steps. You will learn respect, Vorthak snarled, and his massive hand swept toward Hayes. Kate moved without thinking. She stepped between the alien and the ambassador, taking the blow that was meant for her superior. Vorthak's backhand caught her across the face with the force of a sledgehammer. The impact lifted her off her feet and sent her stumbling backward into the wall. Pain exploded through her skull and she tasted blood in her mouth. The room went completely silent. Even the other Zelkarians seemed shocked by their general's sudden violence. Kate slid down the wall and sat on the floor for a moment, her vision blurry and her ears ringing. She touched her lip and felt the blood there. Then she looked up at General Vorthak, who stood over her with satisfaction in his glowing eyes. He expected her to cower, to beg for mercy, like the weak creature he believed her to be. Instead, Kate Sullivan wiped the blood from her mouth, looked up at the 8-foot alien general who had just hit her and smiled. Time seemed to slow down as Kate Sullivan sat against the wall, blood trickling from her split lip. The taste of copper filled her mouth, but it was not the first time she had tasted her own blood in a fight. The pain in her face was sharp and bright, but pain was an old friend. She had learned to use it, to let it fuel her instead of weaken her. General Vorthak stood over her, his red crystal armor gleaming in the conference room lights. His glowing eyes showed satisfaction and contempt. He had just proven his point, about human weakness, or so he thought. The other Zelkarians watched with approval, nodding at their general's display of dominance. This was how things worked in their world. The strong commanded, the weak obeyed. Ambassador Hayes started forward, his face pale with shock and anger. General Vorthak, this is completely unacceptable. You cannot strike a member of a diplomatic mission. I can do whatever I wish to insects, Vorthak replied without taking his eyes off Kate. Your female tried to interfere with my lesson to you. Now she has learned her place. Kate slowly pushed herself up from the floor, using the wall for support. Her legs felt steady beneath her, which was good. Her vision was clear, which was better. She ran her tongue over her split lip and felt the cut there. It would heal. Everything else would heal too. But something else was happening inside her, something that had nothing to do with healing. It was a feeling she recognized from her Marine days, from the battles in the outer colonies when enemy forces had thought they could break human resolve through brutality. It was the cold fire that burned in human hearts when they were pushed too far. Her instructors had called it controlled fury. Her enemies had called it terrifying. The human delegation watched her with worried faces. They saw a small woman who had just been struck by an alien giant. They probably expected her to retreat, to seek medical attention, to let the diplomats handle things with words and treaties. But Kate could see something else in their eyes too, something that told her they understood what was really happening here. The Zelkarians had made a mistake. They had revealed their true nature. This was not a negotiation between equals. This was a strong species trying to dominate a weak one through violence. They had shown that all their talk of honor and strength was really just bullying dressed up in fancy words. Kate straightened up fully and looked around the room. She looked at Ambassador Hayes, who gave her the slightest nod. She looked at the other human delegates, who were all watching her with the same expression. They were waiting to see how humanity would respond to this insult. Then she looked up at General Vorthak, who still stood over her with his arms crossed. He was enormous, probably weighing 3 times what she did. His crystal armor looked like it could stop bullets. His muscles were clearly built for crushing smaller opponents. By every measure that mattered to Zelkarian thinking, he was superior to her in every way. Kate smiled wider, showing her blood-stained teeth. Something flickered in Vorthak's glowing eyes. Uncertainty, maybe. He had expected fear, submission, tears. He had not expected a smile. Behind him, the other Zelkarians shifted uncomfortably. They were starting to realize that something was wrong with this picture. "You find pain amusing, human?" Vorthak asked. But his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I find ignorance amusing," Kate replied, her voice perfectly calm despite the blood on her lip. "You really don't know anything about humans, do you?" The alien general's face darkened with anger. "I know you are weak. I know you bleed. I know you break when struck by your betters." Kate took a step forward, and Vorthak instinctively took a step back. That single movement told everyone in the room something important. The mighty Zelkarian general, supreme commander of their military forces, had just retreated from a human female half his size. "You know what you think you see," Kate said, still smiling. "But you don't see what's really here." She took another step forward. This time Vorthak held his ground, but she could see the confusion in his eyes. This was not how conquered enemies were supposed to behave. When the strong struck the weak were supposed to submit. That was the natural order of things in Zelkarian society. But humans had never been very good at following the natural order of things. Kate thought about her training, about all the hours spent learning how to fight opponents bigger and stronger than herself. The Marines had taught her that size and strength were advantages, but they were not the only advantages. Speed mattered. Technique mattered. Most of all, the willingness to do whatever it took to win mattered more than anything else. The Zelkarians had size and strength, but they also had something else that Kate recognized from her years of combat experience. They had arrogance. They believed their own propaganda about being superior warriors. They had probably never fought an opponent who refused to be impressed by their size and armor. That was going to be their downfall. Kate could see the exact moment when General Vorthak decided he needed to prove his dominance again. His muscles tensed, his weight shifted forward, and his right hand began to rise for another strike. He was going to hit her again, harder this time, to show everyone what happened to humans who did not know their place. Kate had been waiting for this moment. She moved as Vorthak's hand came down, but not backward like he expected. Instead, she stepped inside his reach, grabbing his extended arm with both hands. Her movements were precise and practiced, the result of countless hours of training with opponents much larger than herself. The throw was beautiful in its simplicity. Kate used Vorthak's own massive weight and forward momentum against him, turning his strength into weakness. She pivoted at exactly the right moment, pulled in exactly the right direction, and sent the 8-foot alien general flying through the air. Vorthak hit the floor with a crash that shook the entire conference room. His crystal armor cracked and sparked against the metal deck plating. The sound was like thunder, followed by a silence so complete that everyone could hear their own heartbeats. The mighty General Vorthak, supreme commander of the Zelkarian military, lay on his back staring up at the ceiling. His glowing eyes were wide with shock and disbelief. He had been defeated in single combat by the small human female he had just struck. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. It was humiliating beyond anything he had ever experienced. Kate stood over him, no longer smiling. Her expression was calm and professional, like a teacher who had just finished a particularly important lesson. She looked down at the fallen general, with the same contempt he had shown her moments before. Lesson 1, she said quietly. Never assume the smaller opponent is the weaker opponent. The other Zelkarians stared in stunned silence. Several of them were making soft clicking sounds. That might have been their version of gasps. Commander Zeth, the blue-armored one who had tried to moderate earlier, was looking back and forth between Kate and his fallen general like he could not believe what he was seeing. Ambassador Hayes stepped forward, his diplomatic composure intact, despite the extraordinary circumstances. General Vorthak, I hope you're not injured. Perhaps we should take a brief recess so medical personnel can examine you. Vorthak struggled to sit up, his pride clearly hurt worse than his body. I do not need medical attention from insects, he snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Kate offered him her hand to help him up. The gesture was purely diplomatic, but it served another purpose. It showed everyone in the room that she was not afraid of him even now. She was treating him like any other fallen opponent, with professional courtesy but no special deference. Vorthak stared at her extended hand for a long moment. His entire worldview was crumbling around him. In Zelkarian society, the strong ruled the weak through physical dominance, but this human female had just proven that strength came in forms he did not understand. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached up and took her hand. Kate pulled him to his feet with surprising ease, her small frame somehow generating enough leverage to lift his massive bulk. When he was standing again, she stepped back and assumed a respectful but ready stance. She was giving him space to recover his dignity, but she was also prepared for whatever came next. The conference room remained silent as both sides tried to process what had just happened. The Zelkarians were learning that their assumptions about human weakness might be dangerously wrong. The humans were realizing that their diplomatic mission had just become something entirely different. General Vorthak stood in the conference room, his red crystal armor still cracked from his fall. His glowing eyes swept over the human delegation, seeing them differently now. These were not the weak insects he had expected to crush with words and threats. The small female who had thrown him to the floor stood calmly nearby, ready for whatever came next. Her split lip had stopped bleeding, but the message was clear. Humans did not break easily. Commander Zeth stepped forward, his blue armor catching the light. General, perhaps we should continue this discussion at another time, after we have had time to consider what has happened here. Vorthak's head snapped toward his subordinate, and Zeth immediately stepped back. The general's pride was wounded worse than his body, and wounded pride made Zelkarians dangerous. Are you suggesting retreat, Commander? Are you saying we should flee from these insects because one of them knows a few fighting tricks? I am suggesting caution, sir. We may have underestimated their capabilities. The other Zelkarians murmured agreement, but quietly. They had all seen their supreme general defeated in single combat. It challenged everything they believed about strength and weakness, about who deserved to rule and who deserved to serve. Ambassador Hayes cleared his throat diplomatically. General Vorthak, I apologize for any misunderstanding. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan was protecting me, as is her duty. Perhaps we can return to our negotiations now that we all understand each other better. Vorthak stared at the ambassador for a long moment. His face showed a mixture of rage, humiliation, and something else. Respect, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. In Zelkarian culture, defeating a superior warrior in combat earned honor, not punishment, but accepting that honor meant accepting that the human female was indeed a superior warrior. There will be no more negotiations, Vorthak said finally. His voice was controlled now, but Kate could hear the fury underneath. The Zelkarian Empire does not bargain with species that show disrespect to our leaders. General, striking a diplomatic representative is not exactly showing respect either, Hayes replied calmly. Vorthak's eyes blazed brighter. I struck an insect that dared to interfere with my commands. The fact that the insect could fight back does not change what it is. Kate felt the cold fire in her chest burn a little hotter. She had hoped that defeating Vorthak might make him more reasonable, but it seemed to have had the opposite effect. His pride would not let him admit that a human could be his equal, even after she had proven it. So what happens now? Kate asked, speaking directly to the general for the first time since their fight. Vorthak turned his full attention to her, and she could see the calculations running behind his glowing eyes. He was trying to figure out how she had defeated him, what techniques she had used, whether she could do it again. She could also see something else in his expression. Fear. Not fear of her personally, but fear of what she represented. If one small human female could defeat the supreme general of the Zelkarian military, what did that say about their entire empire? Now, human warrior, you and your people will face the consequences of your disrespect. The Zelkarian fleet will make sure your species learns proper behavior. Ambassador Hayes stood up slowly. General, are you threatening military action against Earth? I am promising it, Vorthak replied. 50 Zelkarian warships orbit this station. Your single escort vessel will be destroyed, and then we will proceed to your homeworld to teach your people the price of insulting the Zelkarian Empire. The human delegation exchanged glances. Kate saw worry in some faces, but not panic. These were experienced diplomats who had planned for various outcomes. They knew this meeting might not go well, and they had prepared accordingly. Hayes reached into his jacket and pulled out a small communication device. I'm sorry you feel that way, General. I had hoped we could reach a peaceful agreement. He pressed a button on the device and spoke clearly. This is Ambassador Hayes, Code Prometheus. Repeat, Code Prometheus. The Zelkarians looked confused. Commander Zeth leaned toward his general. What is Code Prometheus? Hayes smiled grimly. It's what we call a reality check. Kate moved to the conference room's large window and looked out at the space around Nexus 7. The Zelkarian fleet was impressive. 50 massive black ships arranged in an attack formation around the station. They looked like predators circling wounded prey. But she also saw something else, something small and distant but growing larger. The human escort vessel Defiance was moving away from the station, positioning itself between the Zelkarians and the hyperspace jump point. It was a single ship against 50, which should have been suicide. But Kate knew Captain John Mitchell, and she knew the Defiance was not what it appeared to be. Your ship runs away, Vorthak observed with satisfaction. At least some humans know when they are beaten. Captain Mitchell doesn't run from anyone, Kate replied. He's getting into position. Position for what? To surrender more dramatically. Kate turned away from the window and looked at the Zelkarian general. Position to show you what humans are really capable of when you threaten our people. Alarms began sounding throughout the station. The lights dimmed briefly as the station's power systems responded to some massive energy surge nearby. Through the window, Kate could see flashes of light in the distance where the human ship was engaging the Zelkarian fleet. Vorthak moved to the window, his subordinates following. What they saw there made several of them step backward in shock. The Defiance was not running or surrendering. It was fighting, and it was winning. The human ship moved like a dancer, avoiding the massive Zelkarian vessels while striking back, with weapons that seemed far too powerful for such a small craft. Explosions bloomed around several of the alien warships as the Defiance's attacks found their targets. Impossible, Commander Zeth whispered. One ship cannot defeat 50. You're right, Kate said. One ship can't defeat 50, but the Defiance isn't alone. As she spoke, space around the station began to shimmer and twist. The telltale signs of hyperspace emergence appeared in a dozen locations at once. Ships began materializing from the twisted space, but these were not more small human vessels. These were warships, massive and powerful, bristling with weapons and armor. The lead ship was larger than any Zelkarian vessel, a dreadnought with the name Retribution painted on its hull in letters that seemed to glow with their own light. Behind it came cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels, all bearing the insignia of Earth's Space Navy. General Vorthak stared at the growing human fleet with disbelief. Where did they come from? Our scouts reported only one human ship in this system. Ambassador Hayes joined them at the window. The one ship you saw was our diplomatic escort. This is our response fleet. They've been waiting just outside the system in case negotiations failed. You planned for war from the beginning, Vorthak accused. We planned for reality, Hayes corrected. We hoped for peace, but we prepared for what usually happens when humans try to negotiate with species that only respect force. The battle outside was no longer a fight. It was a demonstration. The human fleet moved with precision that impressed even Kate, who had seen Earth's military in action before. Every ship knew exactly where it needed to be and what it needed to do. They fought like parts of a single organism, supporting each other and covering each other's weaknesses. The Zelkarian ships, for all their size and individual power, fought like 50 separate vessels. They got in each other's way, fired at targets. Their allies were already engaging and failed to coordinate their attacks effectively. Within minutes, half their fleet was either destroyed or crippled. Emperor Thraxul's voice suddenly filled the conference room, broadcast from the Zelkarian flagship. This is impossible. How can such a small species have such powerful ships? Admiral Lisa Parker's voice answered from the Retribution. Emperor Thraxul, this is Admiral Parker of the Earth Space Navy. Your fleet is defeated. Order your remaining ships to surrender, and we can end this without further bloodshed. Never. The Zelkarian Empire does not surrender to insects. Then the Zelkarian Empire will learn why insects sometimes evolve into predators. Kate watched as the human fleet moved into final attack positions. The Zelkarians still had 20 ships left, but they were scattered and demoralized. Their formations had broken down completely, and several ships were already trying to retreat. General Vorthak stood at the window, his hands pressed against the glass. Kate could see the exact moment when he realized the truth. The humans had not gotten lucky. They had not won through trickery or accident. They had won because they were better warriors than the Zelkarians had ever imagined possible. How? He asked quietly. How can a species so small and new to space fight like this? Kate moved to stand beside him. Because we've been fighting each other for thousands of years before we reached the stars. We've had practice. The last Zelkarian ships were surrendering now, their weapons powering down and their shields dropping. The great fleet that had come to crush humanity was broken and beaten. Emperor Thraxul's flagship hung motionless in space, surrounded by human warships. Your emperor is about to learn the same lesson you did, Kate told Vorthak. Size and strength don't always win. Sometimes the smaller opponent is actually the more dangerous one. The bridge of the Zelkarian flagship storm of conquest felt different now. The confidence and arrogance that had filled the air just hours ago were gone, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed down on everyone present. Emperor Thraxul sat in his command throne, his purple crystal armor reflecting the dim emergency lighting. His ship was surrounded by human vessels, their weapons trained on his hull. Status report, the Emperor commanded, his voice barely controlled. Commander Vex, the ship's tactical officer, looked up from his station with reluctant eyes. 23 ships destroyed, sir. 15 more heavily damaged and unable to fight. 7 ships have surrendered completely. Only 5 vessels remain combat capable, including our own. Thraxul's massive hands gripped the arms of his throne so tightly that the metal groaned under the pressure. 50 ships, 50 of our finest warships, defeated by a handful of human vessels. How is this possible? The humans fight differently than we expected, sir. Vex replied carefully. Their ships are smaller but faster than ours. Their weapons are more precise, and they coordinate their attacks like they share a single mind. On the main screen, the human dreadnought Retribution hung in space like a sleeping giant. It was massive, nearly as large as the Zelkarian flagship, but where Zelkarian ships were built for intimidation with sharp angles and threatening designs, the human ship looked clean and efficient. It was a tool built for one purpose: winning battles. Admiral Lisa Parker's voice came through the communication system again, calm and professional. Emperor Thraxul, this is your final warning. Surrender now and we can discuss terms. Continue fighting, and I will be forced to destroy your remaining ships. Thraxul stared at the human ship on his screen. Everything he believed about the universe was crumbling around him. The Zelkarian Empire was built on the idea that they were the strongest species in the galaxy. Their entire society depended on other races fearing their military might. If humans could defeat them so easily, what did that mean for their empire? Sir, Commander Vex said quietly, the crew is looking to you for orders. What are your commands? The Emperor sat in silence for a long moment. Pride warred with survival instinct in his mind. He could order his remaining ships to attack, to die fighting rather than surrender to a species they had considered inferior. But that would accomplish nothing except getting more of his people killed. Open a channel to the human admiral, he said finally. Admiral Parker's face appeared on the main screen. She was a woman in her 50s with gray streaking through her dark hair and eyes that had seen many battles. She looked tired but alert, like a predator that had just finished hunting, but was still ready for more prey. Emperor Thraxul, she said with formal courtesy, I'm glad you decided to talk rather than fight. Are you prepared to surrender? I am prepared to discuss terms, Thraxul replied, trying to maintain some dignity. The Zelkarian Empire does not surrender unconditionally to anyone. Parker smiled slightly. Your empire just lost most of its fleet to a force 1/4 its size. I think you're in a poor position to make demands. Perhaps. But you must understand that my people will not accept defeat lying down. We have more fleets, more ships. Destroy us here, and you will face the wrath of the entire Zelkarian military. Will we? Parker asked. Let me tell you what I think will happen. Your other fleets will hear about this battle and realize that humans are not the easy prey they expected. Some of your commanders will want revenge, but others will want to avoid the fate that befell your ships today. Your empire will split between those who want to fight us and those who want to make peace. Thraxul felt a chill run through his massive frame. The human admiral understood Zelkarian politics better than he had expected. She was right that news of this defeat would cause chaos within his empire. Generals would question his leadership, and some might even try to take power for themselves. What do you propose? He asked. First, your remaining ships will power down their weapons and surrender to my fleet. Second, you will come aboard Nexus 7 for proper negotiations with Ambassador Hayes. Third, you will order all Zelkarian forces to avoid human space until a formal agreement is reached. And if I refuse? Parker's expression hardened. Then I will finish what you started and destroy every ship you have left. Then I will send word to Earth that the Zelkarian Empire prefers war to peace. Our response fleets will begin hunting down your other forces throughout the galaxy. The Emperor looked around his bridge at his officers. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. These were proud warriors who had never known defeat before today. Some of them still wanted to fight. He could see it in their eyes. But others looked tired and beaten, ready to accept that they had met their match. Very well, Thraxul said slowly. I agree to your terms. Parker nodded. Wise choice. Please prepare to transfer to Nexus 7 within the hour. The screen went dark, leaving the Zelkarian bridge in uncomfortable silence. Commander Vex was the first to speak. Sir, the crew is asking what they should tell their families. How do we explain that we were defeated by humans? Thraxul stood up from his throne and looked out at the human ships surrounding them. We tell them the truth. We underestimated our enemy and we paid the price for our arrogance. Back on Nexus 7, Kate Sullivan stood in the same conference room where everything had started. The broken pieces of Zelkarian crystal armor had been cleaned up, and the table had been repaired. But the atmosphere was completely different now. The humans sat confidently while they waited for the Zelkarian leadership to arrive. Ambassador Hayes was reviewing his notes for the upcoming negotiations. Admiral Parker did excellent work out there, quick, decisive, and with minimal casualties on both sides. The Admiral knows her business, Kate agreed. But the hard part is just beginning. Defeating them was easier than making peace with them will be. Why do you say that? Kate thought about her brief fight with General Vorthak and what she had seen in his eyes afterward. Their whole culture is based on being the strongest. Having humans beat them so completely is going to cause problems we can't solve with weapons. The conference room doors opened, and the Zelkarian delegation entered. But this time they looked different. Their armor was still impressive, but they moved without the arrogant swagger they had shown before. Emperor Thraxul led them, his purple armor catching the light but somehow seeming less bright than before. General Vorthak was with them, his red armor now showing visible repair marks from his fall. When he saw Kate, he stopped and looked at her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he bowed slightly. It was a small gesture, but from a Zelkarian general to a human, it was enormous. "Lieutenant Commander Sullivan," he said formally, "I owe you an apology for my behavior earlier. You fought with honor, and I responded with dishonor." Kate bowed back, matching his formal tone. "Apology accepted, General. Warriors sometimes clash when they first meet. What matters is how they behave afterward." Emperor Thraxul watched this exchange with interest. His glowing eyes moved between Kate and his general, clearly trying to understand the dynamic between them. "So you are the human female who defeated our supreme military commander." "I am Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan," Kate replied. "And yes, I defeated General Vorthak, but only because he underestimated what humans are capable of." "Indeed." Thraxul moved to the window and looked out at the space where his fleet had been destroyed. "It seems my entire empire has been guilty of that same error." Admiral Parker's voice came through the room's communication system. "Emperor Thraxul, this is Admiral Parker. My fleet is standing by, but I want you to know that we take no pleasure in what happened today. We came here hoping for peace." "And yet you brought a battle fleet," Thraxul observed. "We brought what we needed to ensure that peace was possible," Parker replied. "History has taught us that species who only respect strength will not negotiate seriously unless that strength is demonstrated." Ambassador Hayes stepped forward. "Your Majesty, please, let's sit down and discuss how we can move forward from here. The galaxy is large enough for both our peoples to prosper." Thraxul looked around the room one more time, taking in the faces of the humans who had just humbled his mighty empire. They were not gloating or demanding tribute like conquerors might. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested in finding a solution that worked for everyone. "Very well, Ambassador Hayes. Let us see if the Zelkarian Empire can learn to coexist with humanity." As the two sides took their seats around the repaired conference table, Kate remained standing by the window. Outside, human and Zelkarian ships floated in space together, their weapons powered down. It was the beginning of something new, something that had never existed before in this part of the galaxy. Two warrior species learning to respect each other not through fear, but through mutual recognition of each other's strength. The real negotiations were about to begin. 3 hours later, the conference room on Nexus 7 looked completely different. The formal seating arrangement had been replaced with a more relaxed setup, with humans and Zelkarians sitting together around smaller tables. The mood had changed, from hostility to something that might eventually become cooperation. Ambassador Hayes sat across from Emperor Thraxul, with documents spread between them. Kate Sullivan stood nearby, officially part of the security detail, but really serving as a reminder of what had brought them all to this point. General Vorthak sat at his emperor's right hand, his repaired armor gleaming under the conference room lights. "The terms we are proposing are simple," Hayes explained, pointing to the documents. "Mutual recognition of territorial boundaries, establishment of trade routes, and a non-aggression pact between our species. No tribute, no subjugation, no demands for submission from either side." Emperor Thraxul studied the papers with careful attention. His advisors leaned in to whisper comments and suggestions, but he waved them away. These terms assume that our species are equals. How can we be equals when your fleet just destroyed mine? Because military victory doesn't make one species superior to another, Hayes replied. It just means we're better at fighting wars. There are probably things your people can do that we can't. The goal is to find ways to benefit from each other's strengths. General Vorthak spoke up for the first time since sitting down. Ambassador Hayes, may I ask you something directly? Of course, General. Why did you not demand our surrender completely? Why offer us partnership instead of demanding that we serve you as we expected you to serve us? Hayes looked thoughtful. Because that's not how humans think about strength, General. We've learned that the strongest societies are built through cooperation, not domination. When we defeat an enemy, we prefer to turn them into an ally if possible. Kate stepped forward slightly. General Vorthak, may I add something? The alien general nodded, and Kate could see genuine curiosity in his glowing eyes. He was trying to understand these strange humans who fought like demons but negotiated like philosophers. In human history, our greatest enemies often became our closest allies after we stopped fighting each other. We learned that respect earned through combat can be the foundation for lasting friendship. You're a warrior, General. You understand that defeating a worthy opponent brings honor to both sides. Vorthak considered this carefully. You are saying that by fighting well against you, we have earned your respect? Exactly. And by fighting well against us, we earned yours. Now we can build something together based on that mutual respect. Emperor Thraxul leaned back in his chair, a gesture that made his massive frame seem slightly less imposing. This is a new concept for us. In Zelkarian society, the strong rule the weak. It has always been this way. And how has that worked out for your empire? Admiral Parker asked as she entered the conference room. She had just finished securing the surrendered Zelkarian ships and making sure both fleets were safely separated. What do you mean? Thraxul asked. Parker sat down at the table, her uniform still showing signs of the recent battle. I've been studying reports about your empire for months, Your Majesty. You control dozens of worlds and hundreds of smaller species. But how many of those species actually want to be part of your empire? How many would rebel if they thought they could win? The Emperor's expression darkened. Rebellion is always a possibility when ruling over others. It is the price of maintaining order. But what if you didn't have to rule over them? Kate asked. What if instead of forcing them to obey you, you convinced them to work with you? Commander Zeth, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. The humans speak of cooperation, but how can different species truly cooperate? We have different needs, different goals, different ways of thinking. Hayes smiled. Commander, before today, how much did you know about human capabilities? Very little, Zeth admitted. We assumed you were weak because you were small and new to space travel. And we assumed you were simply bullies because you demanded tribute from everyone you met. Both of us were wrong. We learned more about each other in one day of conflict than we might have learned in years of peaceful contact. Kate walked to the window and looked out at the mixed fleet of human and Zelkarian ships. The difference is that now we know what each other is really capable of. You know we're not weak prey that can be easily dominated. We know you're not just mindless conquerors. We can build a relationship based on truth instead of assumptions. General Vorthak stood and joined her at the window. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan, may I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. When I struck you, what did you feel? Anger? Fear? Hatred? Kate thought about her answer carefully. I felt disappointed, General. I had hoped that first contact between our species would be different, but I also felt determined to show you that humans don't break when you hit us. And when you defeated me, what did you feel then? Sad, Kate replied, which clearly surprised him. I felt sad that it was necessary. I would have preferred to earn your respect some other way. Vorthak was quiet for a long moment. In Zelkarian culture, warriors who defeat their enemies in single combat often become blood brothers afterward. It is a way of acknowledging that both fought with honor. Are you offering to become blood brothers with a human? Kate asked with a slight smile. I am offering friendship with a worthy warrior, regardless of what species she belongs to. Emperor. Threxul had been listening to this exchange with growing interest. He stood and approached the window where Kate and his general were talking. General Vorthak, you believe this human female could serve as a bridge between our species? I believe she already has, Your Majesty. She showed us that strength comes in many forms. Now we must decide whether we are wise enough to learn from that lesson. Ambassador Hayes joined them at the window. Your Majesty, I'd like to propose something. Instead of trying to negotiate a complete treaty today, why don't we start with something smaller? A cultural exchange program. Send some of your people to visit human worlds, and we'll send some of ours to visit yours. Let our species get to know each other before we make any permanent agreements. Admiral Parker nodded approvingly. That's a good idea. And in the meantime, we can establish some basic ground rules. No more threats, no more demands for tribute, no more assumptions about who's superior to whom. Emperor Thraxul looked around the room at the mixed group of humans and Selkarians. A few hours ago, they had been enemies preparing for war. Now they were discussing friendship and cooperation. It was almost too much to believe. Very well, he said finally. The Zelkarian Empire agrees to this cultural exchange. But I have one condition. What's that? Hayes asked. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan must be part of the first human delegation to visit our capital world. My people need to meet the warrior who defeated our Supreme General and then offered him friendship. Kate looked surprised. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not a diplomat. I'm just a soldier. Exactly, Vorthak said. You are a warrior who speaks with actions, not just words. My people will understand you better than they would understand a diplomat. General Vorthak turned to face Kate directly. Lieutenant Commander, in the name of the Zelkarian Empire, I formally apologize for striking you during our first meeting. It was the action of an ignorant fool who did not recognize the warrior he was facing. Kate extended her hand to him, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. Apology accepted, General, but let's make sure we both learned something from it. What have we learned? Kate smiled. That respect can't be demanded or threatened into existence. It has to be earned, and that the best way to earn respect is to show it to others first. Ambassador Hayes cleared his throat. Well then, it seems we have the foundation for a lasting peace. Shall we begin drafting the formal agreements? As the two delegations returned to their seats around the conference table, Kate remained at the window for a moment longer. Outside, human and Zelkarian ships continued their careful dance around each other, no longer as enemies but not yet as friends. It would take time to build trust between their species, but the foundation was there. She touched her lip where Vorthak had struck her. The cut had healed, but she would always remember the moment when everything changed. It had taken just 3 seconds to turn potential enemies into potential allies. 3 seconds to show the galaxy that humans could not be bullied or intimidated. Most importantly, it had taken just 3 seconds to prove that strength without wisdom was just violence, but strength combined with mercy could become something much more powerful. Hope for the future. Kate Sullivan walked back to the conference table where humans and Zelkarians were beginning to write the first chapter of their shared story. It was a good beginning.